Dr. Seuss died on September 24, 1991. By this time, he had written and illustrated 47 children's books. His books have been translated into 15 different languages and had sold over 200 million copies worldwide. He has also been the source for 30 children's television specials, a Broadway musical, and 3 feature-length motion pictures. But Dr. Seuss is remembered as more than just another children's author. He is a source that sparked the imaginations of millions of children with his fantastical lands, lovable creatures, colorful illustrations, and absurd rhyme. There are many aspects of Dr. Seuss's style that makes it memorable for people of all ages. His undeniably individualistic manner makes his words and works immortal, and they live on to this day. The stories that Dr. Seuss wrote are known to millions, but what about his story?
On March 2, 1904, in the town of Springfield, Massachusetts, a boy named Theodore Seuss Geisel was born. His family had owned a brewery for 2 generations, enjoying great economic success. This financial stability was threatened with the onset of Prohibition and World War I. The Geisels, being German immigrants, became the target of many racial slurs. In order to overcome their heritage, the family became very involved in pro-American activities. Despite the financial and social hardships, the family prospered, and Ted enjoyed a comfortable childhood. There are numerous influences from Ted's childhood that are apparent in his works. Many of his books include illustrations that reflect landmarks and objects in the town of Ted's childhood. Ted's mother, Henrietta Seuss Geisel, would often chant rhymes to her children when they had difficulty falling asleep. Ted recognized his mother as a major source of his ability to rhyme. It seemed that Ted was a cartoonist at heart, even in grade school. He could often be found doodling on the edges of his papers. His teachers considered the drawings eccentric and disapproved of them. Regardless, Ted continued drawing all through his grade school and high school years. He also spent these years writing humorous poems and rhymes, as well as a column for his high school's newspaper. In the fall of 1921, Ted was off to college at Dartmouth. He worked hard to get on the school humor magazine, The Jack-o'-lantern, and became editor-in-chief in 1924. This was put to an end a year later when Ted was caught throwing a drinking party with some of his friends, which was against both school policy and prohibition laws. Now unable to write for the Jack-o'-lantern directly, Ted began submitting his works under the pen name Seuss, which was both his mother's maiden name and his middle name. In college, the members of Ted's fraternal club voted him least likely to succeed, a title that turned out to be very inaccurate. After graduating from Dartmouth in 1925, Ted still hadn't settled on a career to pursue. He proceeded to Oxford to become a doctor, as his father wanted. Ted continued doodling on his papers, and one drawing caught the eye of Helen Palmer, a fellow American. Helen suggested that Ted become an artist, which he did, and the pair became good friends. After his decision, Ted dropped out of Oxford and spent the remainder of the year traveling Europe with friends. They visited Paris, where Ted asked Helen to marry him. They were married in 1927. After returning to America, Ted's career as a freelance cartoonist began well. He was published in the Saturday Evening Post and was soon offered a staff position from Drudge magazine. He was offered a job in advertising for Standard Oil, and his primary promotion became Flit, a pesticide. This was the source of the phrase, "Quick Henry the Flit." Ted spent over 15 years in advertising for such companies as Ford, General Electric, Holly Sugar, and others. The idea for his first book was dreamed up while he and his wife were headed for vacation. While on the cruise ship, Ted was bothered by the rhythm of the engines. Helen suggested that he make the rhythm into a rhyme, and Ted came up with the phrase, "And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street." After being rejected by 27 publishers, an old friend of Ted's published the book and many books that followed it. Ted wrote several more books over the following years, all of them receiving moderate success. However, the turning point in his career did not occur until nearly 20 years later. The time was now the early 1940s, and Ted, like many Americans, knew a war with Japan and Germany was imminent. Ted was submitting 3 to 5 political cartoons a week to PM Magazine. His cartoons often featured a mockery of political leaders and activists, such as Hitler, Mussolini, and Lindbergh. Ted's stance on the prominent issues, such as the war and civil rights, was clearly depicted in his cartoons. He believed in equality for all people and was opposed to the isolationism of the U.S., urging the country to get involved. Some readers claimed that Ted's battles were only on paper because at 38 he was too old for the draft. Ted resented this fact, and in 1943 he joined a branch of the Army called Frank Capra's Signal Corps, located in Hollywood. There he learned the art of animation from one of the leading directors of the time, Frank Capra. He created instructional films for the recruits, which featured an animated trainee named Private Snafu and had scripts that rhymed. 2 of his films, Hitler Lives and Designed for Death, won Academy Awards. Ted spent 3 years in the service and spent the following 7 years in the film industry. In 1953, Ted decided that he no longer wanted to animate movies or advertise. He wanted to write children's books. He had already written several by this point in his life, and so he set to work on another. The story became Horton Hears a Who with his message of equality for all people.
I'll just have to save him, because after all, a person's a person, no matter how small.
An article was published in the 1954 issue of Life magazine entitled Why Johnny Can't Read. The article blamed children's lack of interest toward reading on the books themselves, saying they were boring.
Children's books should require illustrations that widen rather than narrow the associative richness the children give to the words.
When Ted heard this distressing fact, he resolved to reverse the problem by writing books that would interest as well as educate children. He wrote The Cat in the Hat using a vocabulary of only 220 words off of a list of vocabulary for beginning readers.
We looked, then we saw him step in on the mat. We looked, and we saw him, the cat in the hat.
During the tremendous success of The Cat in the Hat, Ted co-established the Beginner's Books division of Random House Publishing. Soon after, Seuss's publisher, Bennett Cerf, bet $50 that he couldn't write an entire book using only 50 words. This wager led to the creation of Green Eggs and Ham, which followed the guidelines and used the variations of only 50 words.
I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, same I am.
Ted's unparalleled imagination led to many people asking the same question: where did the ideas come from? Ted's answer served only to emphasize his distinctive wit.
This is the most asked question of any successful author. Most authors will not disclose their source, for fear that other, less successful authors will chisel in on their territory. However, I am willing to take that chance. I got all my ideas in Switzerland, near the Fork of Pass. There is a little town called Gletsch, and 2,000 feet up above Gletsch, there is a smaller hamlet called Ubergletsch. I go there on the 4th of August every summer to get my cuckoo clock repaired. While the cuckoo is in the hospital, I wander around and talk to the people in the streets. They are very strange people, and I get my ideas from them.
Ted's wife Helen had been an important aspect of his life, often helping him with the characters and plotlines of his stories. After being married for 40 years, Helen's failing health began to get the best of her. She died on October 27, 1967. Ted married his longtime friend Audrey Diamond on June 21, 1968. She brought him stability and support, and continues to this day as the head of Dr. Seuss Enterprises.
All in all, the immortal words and works of Dr. Seuss made an enormous, lasting impression on people everywhere.
If you think of Seuss's legacy, it's to be creative, to think outside the box. That's part of his lasting appeal.
Ted Geisel is an individual who is often not given enough credit for all that he did. Many people do not even know Dr. Seuss's real name, nor do they know his numerous accomplishments go beyond writing books. He is one of the founders of beginner books. He invented the word nerd, and he is the only author in the world who has sold more children's books than J.K. Rowling. He lived in a refurbished observatory tower and was awarded the honorary title of Doctor from Dartmouth. He joined the military and drew controversial cartoons, but a majority of his actions are not included in his legacy. And perhaps this anonymity is a part of his appeal. Ted Geisel was never one for the limelight. He was a man who waged war against illiteracy, prejudice, pollution, the arms race, and greed, all in the discreet form of children's books.
In the end, what drove Ted, I think, was to be useful to the world. He sent those wacky warriors he created out to wage the battles of the underdog, with whom he always felt a kinship. Battles against illiteracy, environmental ruin, the arms race, greed, conformity. He taught generations of children that it was fine to be different, and it was even better to do good, but that it all should have some fun about it.
In the summer before he died, Ted's biographers asked him if there was anything that remained unsaid, any message for the children of America which was not conveyed in his books. His answer focused on more than just the children. From his not quite famous younger years to his books of world renown, the man known as Rosetta Stone, Dr. Theophrastus Seuss, Theo Leipzig, Dr. Seuss, and Ted Geisel, despite being voted least likely to succeed, became undeniably one of the most unique and successful individuals of all time.
I miss him terribly. There will never be another Dr. Seuss.